Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna. In this video, we're going to take a look at techniques that you can use to work from photo references to capture action poses. So in this particular example here, I'm using an image from unsplash.com, and the question might be, how do you even begin to draw something like this? Well, first thing I like to do when I'm looking at a pose is I like to identify where the shoulder blades are. So I'm going to represent that with a cylinder, and I have another cylinder that represents the other shoulder blade, just like the relative angles. And then I also look at the pelvis. So I look at where the leg comes out of the pelvis, and I represent that with a cap of a cylinder, and I extend this back like so. So these landmarks here are going to help me when it comes to actually drawing the pose. Identify where the shoulders are, and the caps themselves are where the arm connects to the torso, right? And sometimes with characters wearing clothing, it might be a little bit difficult to see that, but you want to get into the habit of at least identifying where the limbs connect to the body. So once I have this, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a connection here. I'll just create a simple spine, a line of action, if you will. And I'll move this out here just a little bit. And I'm going to draw in a different color here so it's going to be a little bit easier to see. I'm going to draw this arm, and I'm going to represent that upper arm as a cylinder. The lower arm seems to be coming out towards the viewer, so I'll represent that as a cylinder that is actually moving us out into this particular space. I'm not worried about the hand, I'm just trying to capture the angle of the upper and lower arm. Similarly, for the other arm here, part of it is obscured because the foot or the leg is covering it. So I'll just have to do my best and say, okay, well, this arm is coming down like this. And then we can see an angle like this. Now I'm ready to tackle the legs and feet. So I've got the thigh. These are tapered cylinders. I'm going to leave a gap where the knees are. And to avoid confusion here, I'll just pick a green color so we can see the other leg. So we have an angle that looks something like this. And you have the other leg looking something like this. So this gives me an idea of what the general pose is. And I think it's a good start because we can take this particular pose for this body type and remap it to someone who's more heavyset. We can remap it to a female character. This is a male character here, and so on and so forth. But those landmarks of the shoulder blades and the pelvis, especially the tilt and the angle of both of those structures, is really, really important. Let's go ahead now and draw the neck. We can represent that as a cylinder. And for the hands themselves, we can see that the hand is essentially a trapezoidal shape. So I'm going to denote the top part of the hand as follows, and then we have the individual fingers, which I'm just going to represent with tapered cylinders. The other hand here, we can see that we have the palm, we have a thumb. A thumb is basically a drumstick. You can think of it in a very simplified way like that. And then we have some curvature of the fingers. And then finally, I can go ahead and start to block out the feet. The feet, essentially, you can think of it as a cone. And that cone is going to have another cone coming out. And these cones are not going to have the tips. They're just simply going to be slightly chopped off. Same thing here. We have a cone that represents the heel, and we have another cone that is connected to it. like so. And then lastly, for the head, we can see that the head is, and I'll just rotate my canvas here. When I'm dealing with characters that are at a slightly different angle, it helps to actually rotate the canvas. And we have the jawline here. I might have drawn the head a little bit too big, but the basic idea still stands. We have outlined the position of the limbs, both the hands, the arms, and the legs and the feet. From there, I can always drop the opacity, then begin fleshing out the actual character. So I'll go in with a darker color. I'm working on a new layer now. And when I'm looking at the clothing that this character is wearing, every time we have a bend in your limbs, so in this case we have the upper arm and the lower arm, and there is a fold. We can represent that fold a number of ways, but I'm just going to simplify this by just drawing a small range of lines that fan out from where the bend originates. And this is just going to allow me to say that this area is pinched, this area right over here is stretched, right? It's basically when you bend your limbs, basically what ends up happening is the other side, depending upon how baggy or how bulky the clothing is, will be a little bit more taut. So I'm going to now use this to identify the clothing. I can add some thickness. We have the collar of the jacket. We have another shirt that's in there. I'm not really worried about details at this particular stage, but this is giving me some type of a landmark to shoot from. And we can see that there are some folds over here as well. So this helps me when it comes to placing clothes on a character. I know now exactly the concavity of the cap, because I can look and see that, oh, this particular limb is coming out like this. So I can determine the limbs and the opening of the clothing by indicating those cylinders. So now I can flesh this out. I can draw the other fingers in there. And then we have a thumb, which we can sort of see a little bit of. And then lastly, we have the pants. So the folds on those pants are going to actually, wherever the bend is, you're going to have the folds originate from. It's a little bit hard to see over here, but we can use our logic to kind of determine where those folds are going to actually fan out from. And then we have the collar. You can see that here there's no fold on the top. And he's got some skinny jeans on. And now I can draw the shoes. And there's a slight opening here, so we can see the bottom side of the shoes. And this foot is actually coming out towards the viewer, so I'll just indicate that as a plane. And I have something that looks like this. So this is just using my landmarks to help me with regards to positioning. And now I know he's wearing some kind of a hoodie. I'm looking at the lighting, looking at the creases that we have there. And then we have, he's wearing a baseball hat. And we have a little bit of that hoodie coming over. Again, I'm not really worried about details at this stage, but I've essentially captured this pose. And I all started out with just identifying some key landmarks. Let's go ahead and try this with a different example. So I've got another example over here, and I'll put links to both these images that I found from Unsplash. Make a new layer. I'm looking at the pose, I'm identifying where are the arms coming out from, so that's going to help me with regards to creating the landmarks for the shoulder blade. Something like this. The pelvis, I have a cylindrical shape that looks something like this. Usually for females, the pelvis area is going to be a little bit wider. And this will help me now in terms of planting the limbs. So I'll just pick a different color for that. Got the upper arm. I've got the lower arm. The lower arm is going to be slightly longer than the upper arm. I've got a trapezoidal shape that represents the hand, which we'll draw here in a minute. And we also have a neck. We'll draw the other limb. And I'm not worrying about the shirts yet. Let's just draw the two legs and feet. These are tapered cylinders. I like to leave a gap for the knee. You'll notice that it's not just one straight line. There's a little bit of a tilt there. The lower legs are going to be slightly longer than the upper legs. And then we have a cylinder that represents the heel. We have, a cone, and then we have another cone that represents the front part of the shoe. And these cones are kind of blunted off. Same thing over here. We have a cone, and then we have another cone. We have our hand. I'm going to represent the palm as a trapezoidal shape. If I look at what I have here, looks pretty good. I'll just draw the head now. The head, I'll represent the front of the head. I'm looking at the bottom and the angle of the jaw. We can see that where the jaw is, the head actually kind of extends a little bit further behind. And then from there, we have enough information to where I think we can start to work out the clothing. So we have a gap here, we have an opening. We have the shirt, it's a short sleeve shirt. There's going to be a little bit of an opening here. We can see that where the sleeve is intersecting with the torso, we have this fan type fold. Wherever the shirt also tucks in, we have these folds. They're also going to be fan-like. They're not going to be parallel. And then we have the back side of the shirt. Clothing actually extends. Unless it's skin-tight clothing, the clothing will actually have a little bit of a gap between where the limbs pop out. So we've got this. And then I'm looking for the drumstick that represents the thumb. And then we have fingers that are bent. Those are going to be represented as cylinders. We can't see all of our fingers there, so I'm just going to leave that as is. Then we have the other arm. And we have the thumb, which is our drumstick. We have the other finger somewhat bent. represent that as a cylinder. And then she's got a skirt. We can see where the shirt meets the skirt. We have a curve that looks something like this. Now this is basically like a shirt that's tied around her. She's wearing some shorts. So I will first indicate the shorts themselves. There's going to be a little bit of a gap there. And I'll come back in with a different color to go ahead and denote the shirt. So this is just basically an underdrawing. Then we have the thigh. We've got a kneecap. And this shoe basically has a little bit of a gap. And we can see that there's a little bit of a heel. Again, I'm not worried too much about details, and you shouldn't either at this particular stage. This is just to capture the pose. And we have the other shoe. There's a heel, some tread. And then we'll draw the head. And for this video, I'm just keeping it very, very simple. I'm just focusing on pose. I'm not focusing on drawing the head and delving into a lot of the details. You can also see there's a little bit of a fold here. And now let's deal with the shirt that she's wearing. And I'll just draw this in green. I can hide the under drawing. I always like to use new layers for this, so I can see that the shirt essentially has three main structures. I can see that there's some kind of a trapezoidal shape here. There's another trapezoidal shape like so. I can see another trapezoid right here. And we have an area where the shirt is actually tied. And this is going around her body. So essentially we have these structures here. We also see a little bit of that same shirt. And I'm drawing through the form. That's really, really important. You want to draw through the form so you can see things clearly. So I can see that. Maybe I need to make a correction here. We see some of the hip. And then we see this shirt. And I obviously am using some straighter edges here, but I can always round this out. But essentially what I have is the pose. And from here, I can make whatever changes or modifications to this pose to create another character, right? I can take the same pose, I can put a different character in the same pose just by understanding the relationship of the pelvis and the shoulder blades. Let me explain. So I'll just hide the reference. Let's just move the skirt. We'll move this off to the side. And let's say that I want to have more of a muscular guy in this particular pose. Well, what I can do is I can extend the width of the shoulders, move them further apart. I will bring the pelvis down, like so. And then I can add the arms. The arms are going to be a little bit thicker. Because this is a bigger character, kind of spilling outside of our original template here, but that's okay. And we'll just add the arms and legs. make the character a little bit taller. So essentially I'm just following the same cylindrical shapes, just mapping on a different body. And so now I've got a male character essentially in that same basic pose. So that's a little bit about drawing poses. These are some techniques that I use. It helps me when I'm looking at references. Hopefully it'll help you as well. It's a little bit of a longer video, but I wanted to be able to share this with you because this is the #1 question that I get asked. Drawing people, drawing poses. It can be easy if you're working from a good reference, but you also have an understanding of the landmarks. Shoulder blades and pelvis are the key takeaways. From there, you can always adapt. And even if you're working with a pose that's, say, for a female, but you want to apply that to a male character, you can always just adjust the proportions of the cylinders that represent the shoulder blades and the pelvis. So if you found some value in this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. As always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time. See ya.